So I'm going to call together the Communication and Policy Committee. Today is November 9th, 2020. We are meeting in the central office boardroom. So on today's agenda is to discuss the draft policy 162, which is the transgender and gender nonconforming students. Then we will move to policy 532, which I'm not even sure is a draft yet. It's just a discussion in progress with a number. And then which is a suicide prevention and response policy. And then we will move to another discussion about another policy that we need to have come on board. And that one doesn't even have does it have a number yet? Yes, it does. It is potentially policy 528 regarding pregnant students. So without further ado, I will look to our policy wonk, said with all due respect, that could possibly muster. And Karen, why don't you tell us where we are with 162?
Excuse me.
Okay.
Oh,
Do
I'm
you
sorry,
want to open
Tom.
the meeting?
I just-
We didn't do a vote.
Oh, we didn't do a roll call.
A roll call.
Okay, so I will, sorry, I forgot about roll call. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
So we should call,
Because you're in person.
I'm sorry?
You
Not-
don't need a roll call because it's an in-person meeting.
Oh, okay.
Not a roll call vote, but just to define who the members of the committee are and their attendance is probably well worthwhile, so thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, I don't know whether we want to start with me. I'm Gina Cannon. I'm the chair of the Communication and Policy Committee, at least until January. And would other members who are present, whether they are online or whether in person, could you please identify yourself? And if you're online, whether you are present and whether you are alone.
Actually, I was saying you can't hear, but you just talked to Lyndon, right? Lyndon's on.
Yeah.
David Parker's online. He's a board member. I don't think he's a committee member, but he's here. He says that he can't hear anything.
Okay, I'll text him and ask him to log off and log back on. And so,
So, I'm Tom Croto and I'm here.
and you are also a member of the committee?
I am.
Okay.
I'm Pamela Walsh, and I'm a new member of the committee.
Welcome, welcome,
Pamela.
And who else is present from the board who is not a committee member?
I'm David Parker here.
Oh, hey, Dave.
I'm David Parker. Yeah, I can hear that. Okay. Thank you.
And I think Dave is on the committee. No? Oh, okay.
Don't think so. Let me
My
double
mistake.
check.
Sorry, you're,
The committee
Right.
members, Gina, Tom, Pamela Walsh, and Chuck Crush.
Right.
Chuck.
Okay, so, no, but I was asking for board members who are either online or here in person, Jim.
Okay. Jim Richards, I am not on the committee. I am just sitting in.
And from the administration?
Good evening, Kathleen Murphy, Interim Superintendent. Joining us this evening is Jack Dunn, our Business Administrator, as well as Karen Fisher-Anderson, our Title IX Safety Compliance Officer. And I think that you just heard from Lyndon Jackett, who will take the minutes this evening, who is the administrative to the Office of the Superintendent. And of course, our good man from the TV station is behind us, and he's helping us, Josh is helping us with tonight's production. So,
Thank you, Kathleen. Tom, since I'm still new at this, have I forgotten anything this time around?
Not that I can remember myself.
Okay. Do you want to take it now, Karen?
Sure. Pamela, just to give you a little bit of background, if I can, on this. Okay, so I brought forth this draft policy, transgender, gender nonconforming students, which is 162, last board meeting. And I brought it forward because we had just finished up on the non-discrimination EEO policy. And obviously, gender orientation is one of the suspect classes, so it seemed like it was the right timing to try and work on this. So we took a look at it, and what I had done in preparation is I went to the New Hampshire School Board Association model policy that they put out. And I also went and I looked and did some additional research on some of the other school districts, and specifically landed on Sanborn Regional School District, because they did have a policy, and also Oyster River. And so I looked at our policy, and then on the hard copy that was distributed to the committee, in darker, almost like a yellow. I apologize, I don't know if you have a current copy of
I
that.
have an email version, so it doesn't have any of the markings. I don't know
Okay.
if it's possible to get one of this policy.
Okay, we can
Thank you.
make sure we get you one of those.
Transgenders.
Transgender, non-conforming, so,
No, transgender?
Transgender. It's just not marked up, so I.
got it. So what we decided to do last time was I came in and I introduced also a publication on schools in transition. This is a publication that was recommended to me by Dr. Margie Braska, who's the school psychologist over at the high school. And so what I went ahead and made copies available to each of the committee members that were here, and in addition to the other two school policies, and then this rough draft with the what I highlighted as potential additions that I thought were important and should be considered by the committee. So we talked about it for a while, and we decided that we needed to study this. Obviously, it's a big step. We also wanted to know if there were some educational resources out there that potentially could be available to come in and ask and answer questions for board members. So we agreed, and I went back and I reached out to a couple resources. First and foremost, I reached out to Miss Heather Ouellette Kaijan. I hope I pronounced that right. She is a staff member over at the Concord High School. She's also a member of GLSEN. It's GLSEN. She's on their board. It stands for Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network. And Heather's been a great resource to me in helping me kind of figure out what direction to go in. She has agreed, when we're ready, that if the committee would like her to come in and answer questions and talk about why this is, in her opinion, a very, very important policy, she would be willing to do that. Additionally, I went ahead and I met with the students from the group over at the high school called Tide Pride. They are transgender students just this afternoon. We tried to get that together last week and it didn't work. And basically went in and sat down with them, presented them just the opportunity to take a look at the rough draft, and just hoping to understand some of their challenges and hear if this was something they thought was important, whether or not they thought it would be worthwhile, their inputs and so on. It is still in a very formative stage. The kids wanted time to consider it. I talk about it a little bit more. I got some great feedback from as I said, from them today. But at this point in time, I wanted to know if the members had a chance to look at the resources or if they needed anything more as we move forward to the next phase when we're ready, to help with their education. And I want to be sure that the kids said to me today that they would be willing to come in and talk to the board members on a they'd like it to be a closed meeting, but they'd be willing to come in and discuss some of their experiences that they've encountered both in the middle school and in the high school, which I think would be really essential and important for y'all to hear. But again, before we did that, I thought the first step should be having Heather come in and then take it from there. So that's kind of where we are right now. We're still in the studying phase, and I bring that up, Pamela, just to show you, just to tell you where we are and give you all an update. So I don't have anything more than to just give you the status report for tonight on this.
So Pam, I tried to send you a copy of the one
got-
with highlights.
It got placed in my drive, thank you.
You did get the highlights then?
Yes, just now, thank you.
Okay, yep. But I can tell you that before I met with the students, Heather had talked to them and asked if they would have any problem with my coming in and maybe having this discussion. I will tell you the feedback was very positive. They were pleased to at least even be asked. When I met with them today, They were not shy. They were really forthcoming and appreciative of the discussion. And really, I was there to listen. And I did, and I took a bunch of notes. And my plan is, as I said, to get back with Heather, figure out a time that's best for the committee to bring her in, so that when we're ready, we can have questions and she can, I think she's the best information point to start with from here,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Tom?
So, I think this policy is one of the most comprehensive policies we have. I like to look at these as a former teacher and say, if I needed to, could I go to this policy and get answers? And I can't find anything in here that isn't put out there for me to understand.
Good.
Right down to locker rooms and restrooms and the list of definitions, just incredible. Good policy. So, just like last week, my only hiccup in the whole thing is that 14-year-old age part of it. And so I did some online research to try to find out if there was anything. There's no state law that addresses this particular thing yet. It says that it's coming. There are some guidelines, but nothing really specific about when a student is in a situation, however great or small, and they decide that they want to talk about their gender, that they can let schools know, and information can be shared or changed at age 14 or in 9th grade. And it just may be Tom Croto old school. And I just, and having dealt my whole life with middle school kids, that I just don't know if that's the right age. So I'm not going to ever not, move this thing forward, because it's a very good policy, and I think it needs to move forward. But I'd surely love to hear some more talk about what others think about that, and Karen, you and I talked briefly just before
Sure.
the meeting. Could you just kind of tell me the beginnings of where the number 14 came from?
Sure. When I did my research and I talked to Sanborn, and then I actually talked to our counsel, Dean Eckert, on this whole issue about the age, you're absolutely right. There is no law. There's no really any legislative guidance yet. But it seems to be, 14 seems to be consistent with the courts allowing minors to have input on, let's say, a custody arrangement where you have a couple going through divorce and they get input on which parent they might want to live with. So that seemed to be the age where the, that's how Sanborn came up with it. I will also tell you that glsen.org, Glesson, also brought up the age of 14. Interestingly enough, though, when I talked to Heather Ouellette today, the faculty advisor to the Tide Pride, she really said that it's the middle school kids that are really struggling with this. And she actually thought it should be a lower age, but understood the difference, the necessity to involve parents in their kids' education. So I think, it's a great question. I think that's one of the reasons we should bring Heather in, because not only is she a faculty advisor, but she is a part of GLSE Glesson, and I think she could be a great resource to us on how that was brought up.
I know that there's that whole counterbalance of maybe kids don't, at age 13 or 14, don't want their parents to actually know all of what they're thinking. I mean, I know that they don't for many other things, so why would this be any different? And maybe that's kind of the reason. But to actually give students who are 14 the opportunity to say that they themselves can give information about their assigned birth sex, their name change, all of their thoughts and medical things, or non-medical thoughts, and not let a parent know that this child is talking about this in school just makes me a little anxious. But as I said, I I bring that up for the, you know, for whatever discussion there is, and, but I will not thwart the movement of this policy. I think it's really good.
Well, I
Otherwise.
appreciate that input. I will say that when we're talking about the gender orientation at this age, we're not talking about the medical transition. We are talking, primarily where we're seeing this is the kids asking to be referred to as with a different name and pronoun, potentially. And I learned today, sometimes that goes back and forth. But as you know,
Sure.
as a prior middle school teacher, apparently things change a lot in middle school both ways. You know, they can come and go in the whole bit. But the important thing that she has emphasized, and what I heard from the kids today, is how important it is to them, hopefully with their parents' consent, but even if not, to be able to come to school and be in a place where they feel that they are safe, and that they can be who they want to be. And that is really, really important to them. And in some instances where you have parents who are not in favor of this, and if they find out, they may literally take more aggressive steps, i.e. you're not allowed to live in my house anymore. I think that's one of the balancing things we need to look at. Totally agree, 14 is a sort of, we need more background on why 14, but that's the importance for the kids. Was I need to be able to come to school and feel safe, that I can try and be who I want to be.
I've been on the other end of the conversations with parents as a building principal, where information has come forward, usually around discipline. Did you realize that your son has been, 16 absences, or they, had been kept after school 15 times? And the parents, rightly so, are very angry. Why didn't somebody tell me this? Why am I in the dark about this? Why am I just hearing this now? And I can just think that that same kind of conversation could happen if a parent at a parent conference sometime down the road, after this has been established with this small cadre of administrators and perhaps guidance people and this student in October, and then it comes out in February that this is we've been calling your son a different name all this time at their choice.
Right, but not for legal purposes, just
No,
just
no.
within the school. Okay,
Yeah.
they can't do a name change unless they go to court. A name change or a gender from the birth certificate. I think that guidance counselor's role is so important here, because they're there to assist the students in the situation where we have parents who don't know. What I'm hearing from the middle school counselors is that they're there to help have that conversation between the student with the parents.
Okay. That would make me a lot happier. I mean, and I'm only one person.
Yeah.
Well, so, and I'm not sure I understand the language that, in terms of disclosure of information. If a child, under this policy now, if a child is 13 and they say, I believe that my gender identity is opposite of my birth gender, and I would like to be called by a different name now and identified as such, and their parents said, no, absolutely not, that we would go with the parents as opposed to the kid in that situation?
Well, up at least until age 14. That's the thought. That do they have the reasoning and the ability to be able to make those decisions and disclosures? Sometimes it could be a nickname change, but there are other instances where, yes, they want to change their name and they want the pronoun changed. And what I've found is that the schools are willing and can do it on school rosters, non-official school records, that's easier to do. Okay, obviously for SATs, ACT testing, when they, the Department of Education is tracking that kind of stuff, then we would have to have the ability to make sure that child's legal name is on that test. But in all other instances where it's not a formal or official document, they could have that election to be called, a different name from their birth name and a different gender, as long as the pronoun is consistent with the gender, if you will, the gender identification. So in other words, if then the he goes to a she, then the pronoun should be consistent with the she.
Yes. Is there, is that post 14 or pre 14?
Well, we're talking, that's what we're trying to figure out is, and again.
Under
that-
how this is written.
Yeah, and right now it's 14 years or older. I happen to have a young lady this afternoon who said I'm a freshman, I'm 14. Now she's a high school student. So, I think there has to be that leniency in looking kind of at the individual cases, but it does say 14th and not yet in the 9th grade, and she's clearly in the 9th grade. So, and again, I put that in there because I thought age was important. If you don't have to keep that provision in there, but I did think it was just something to be thinking about.
Well, I just wonder whether FERPA provides, not necessarily guidance on this, but anything parallel that might be able to say that when a child can,
18.
I don't know, 18.
It's 18 or
Okay.
secondary education.
Okay.
As
I
far
just-
as the rights
That's why I
go.
thought I'd ask. I'm like, is there anything that will help us out to hang a hat on in age or anything?
No, FERPA's 18 is my understanding, or post-secondary education.
And we haven't had a first reading on this.
Right.
No. I just.
So, the nice thing is we have this process that will put it out there, parents will hear it,
Yep.
and they may say, that Croto, he's got to get into the real world, and, or they may say, something else. But at least the process will play out, and we'll be able to figure it out.
Right.
Yes, so
Just on this.
I propose that as we move down the road, in the next committee meeting or after that, that we bring in Heather Ouellette
I'd like
however
that.
she says her name, who's going to instruct, who could answer these kinds of questions and the more technical questions, because she's,
Sure.
got the background. And then we hear from the students, and we even invite some parents in whose kids have gone through this, and you can, so that way you can be informed and you can hear from all sides.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I think that would.
Do we have anywhere in there that we encourage, or the board would encourage via this policy, recommend that every effort be made by the school counselor to engage the parent in this? It isn't written like that in there.
It isn't.
I don't have
isn't-
it in front of me, so I'm wondering if that wouldn't be something, now remember, you can add things to this policy, this isn't carved in
Sure.
stone. If you feel that you really want to emphasize the parent involvement in these decisions with the kids, then make that recommendation. We encourage, or we recommend, or we, a word like that.
Yeah.
I think that would help. Tom, would you agree that that would help?
I agree that it would help. And now I'm going to switch to the other side and say the wording has to be careful enough so that we don't discourage
Right.
these little kids who are suffering because they don't dare to speak up and,
Right.
and have it go the other way. So the wording would have to be real careful.
Yeah.
But I think anytime as a school district, we encourage communication between students and parents.
That's a good
And
thing.
schools and parents, that's a win-win.
Right, and I know we have a policy in effect that says students have every right to have input in their child's education. It's one of our policies. The one thing I really liked about this resource material is the gender support plan, and it talks about things like what we're talking about assisting the students and having the meeting with the parents, and who else within the circle of school really has a need to know, and the school nurse, for example, the guidance counselor, the people that would be brought into this circle. So again, as we're going through this, I think if you take a look at that transition plan, the support plan, I think that would be really useful as well. And again, there's a lot of this as far as counseling that the school would have to refer out, because if it's a situation where the parents
Right.
are not supportive, then obviously all we can do is provide the resources and hope that they'll reach
that-
out to them.
Sure, and that's our worry, that this child confides in their counselor, thinking that they're gonna be able to get some help finally and some relief finally, and then, whoops, we gotta tell your mom or your dad. Oyster River has, I just happened to notice, after I'd read it 100 times and still didn't see it, on the back of their first page, under procedures, number 2, and it just says should, a meeting should be scheduled to discuss the student's particular circumstances and needs, and then it names people that may include.
Yep.
So maybe if we can, not reinvent the wheel and come up with something around those.
Yeah. And then my final concern, and the reason I think this is so important, is because of the emphasis we've placed, and rightly so, on our recent 415, which is the Title IX. This is clearly one of those areas that if the students come forward and they say, I'm a transgender and I want to be known as X, and we have these, and we're told and we're put on notice, and then we're not giving them the accommodations, I fear that at some point we could be challenged as a
Sure.
discriminatory act. So I think it's the right thing to do for the kids.
Absolutely,
The
and I think
students.
that's number 1. We just,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think supporting the kids has got to be number 1, but we've got to be very, very cognizant of parents' rights in all of this.
mhm.
These kids are still minors. And I think it's a very, very tricky line to walk. In supporting the students sort of developing independence and the parents' rights to still manage their kids' lives until they're 18 and of majority. So, thank you for the work that you've been doing. It is, I'm sure, excruciatingly difficult at times to try and find where that line is, so.
I'll keep looking for more guidance on the age.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thanks.
Does anyone have any other comments about 162 before we move? Anyone who may be listening online? Not seeing any? I guess we should jump into policy 532.
Okay.
Now Kathleen, do you want to introduce why we're even going there in the first place?
Well,
And then we can,
policy number 532, which I will review with you tonight. This is the first time you've seen this. This was a law passed by the legislature back in, July 19.
19.
So it's effective, became effective on
July.
this year of July 1 of 2020. So this policy is something that we need to expedite. It should be in with all the policies for students around the issue of suicide. So let me walk through it. This is your first walkthrough. We simply took the recommendations from the New Hampshire School Board Association and put it in the context of what the Concord School Board policy looks like. But in addition to that, back in, I don't know when we got this. I got this back in the spring, that we had a technical advisory from the New Hampshire Department of Education, which we all have used in order to bring this policy to fruition and have it in place. So let me highlight some of the important aspects of this policy based on the law, as well as the technical advisory from the New Hampshire Department of Ed. It's pretty clear about the response that a school district has to have now relative to any issues around suicide. And you'll see from the policy there are some really important requirements in that plan for us to consider. One, around risk factors, warning signs, that's first important. Second is the response in and out of school relative to student suicides. Education, and that's the education of students about the safety and healthy choices, coping strategies, so all around the health issues that are part of the health curriculum. Training of staff, designated volunteers, anyone working with youngsters in any way, including our entire staff. This doesn't eliminate any member of the staff. We've already, just to give you a highlight, we already began this training this summer. All of our staff had to take a NAMI course. It was a 2-hour course online. that everyone had to take. They had to be certified that they take it, and the principals kept track of, and the department heads all kept track of it. So we've already begun that work around staff training. Obviously, confidentiality, as you know, covers many of our policies when it deals with our students. One of the important pieces too is that we have to make sure that we're providing information and resources to not only our school personnel, our students and our families, as well as our community. So we have some work to do on that also. I think that really covers most of the issues. We need to make sure that we have this covered not only via a policy, the policy is published in student handbooks, in the district handbooks, and any materials that go out relative to student information and information from parents, that this policy is covered in that document. The recommendation in order for coordination is that the superintendent should appoint or designate a staff member to be the district suicide prevention coordinator, one person to help coordinate and work with the building liaisons, because we're going to also ask that there be a building person, someone who can work with that district prevention coordinator in terms of reviewing the policy, updating any information that we have to provide, just working together in a team way to address the components of the suicide policy. The training, by the way, I didn't mention this before, it must be annual, so every year we will be providing training for the entire staff. And of course, the dissemination of information is also critically important. I'm just trying to see if I missed anything. I don't think I did. The only other issue was around training was it was a minimum of 2 hours training. That's a requirement by the law. So the final piece that we will be working on, and I have to say that many of these things are already underway and have been done in the schools, and that we must develop a plan, and that plan must be presented, and it would be presented first to this committee. I would want to present it to the instruction committee, because pieces of that are integrated, and then it would go to the full board for a review, so that we have a suicide plan as part of our work. That plan must be reviewed every 2 years to make sure that it's updated in case there's any changes, or that specifically meets the needs of a community. So those are the basic components of the policy, and I think that I'm open to questions or comments or anything.
One sec. So, as I read through this, it looks like it's sort of a two-part process. We have to approve the policy, and then we have to get the plan in place that the policy lays out. Is that, in your experience, do you know, because we're behind the 8 ball on this, are those things that can be done at the same time?
Well, they really can be, because so many of the plan is already in place. It just hasn't been brought under one cover to say, okay, here's the document, here's the plan. But many of the components are already underway. We just need to make sure that we put them into a plan format for you, have that plan posted. And that includes all kinds of documents that we currently use, assessments of risk of kids, so that we can know what their risk is, and so that we can work with the families, work with mental health folks in the community. So to answer your question, we can actually we're close to doing it simultaneously, but I don't want to rush that plan because I haven't seen all the components yet. And I want Karen to look at it too, because certainly it integrates into other policies that we have.
Right, okay. So, go ahead, Tom, and then I kind of have
Okay.
something else, but.
So, I'm gonna continue to be this broken record of the many, many lessons we learned from the public back when our district was struggling a year and a half ago. We know that we have tons of resources right here in our own state and sometimes in our own city. Many of those folks came out and said, why didn't you call us? Why didn't you talk to us? Why didn't you use us? So there are three that I'm thinking of. There's NAMI, New Hampshire, there's New Hampshire Suicide Prevention Resource Center, and the New Hampshire Medical Society with specific input on child behavior health. So I would encourage us, whenever we're doing training, that we reach out to those folks and utilize them, because not only do they have information that we may not have, but it provides our community with a more collaborative feeling. To have them on board with us. So that's one. And then my second point is, where in here do we provide training for students, or at least awareness for students? And I know it's a slippery slope. Sometimes, you talk about being a vegetarian as an option, and my teacher says I should be a vegetarian. So I just put that out there, Kathleen.
If you look at C, though, in the policy that I gave you, 532, look at C, student education about safe and healthy choices, coping strategies, recognition of risk factors, and warning signs of mental disorder and suicide, and helping seeking strategies.
That sounds great, I just don't see it.
Yeah, it's C, Tom, under number 1, specific requirements for plan.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
A1C.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I think the other thing is the district, prior to my arrival, had already reached out to NAMI. They're a fabulous resource to use. But the Department of Ed has a wonderful Bureau of Wellness that they have been also very good about providing us with resources. You also have organizations like Riverbend, the Community Mental Health Center, and I know that at New Futures, they're doing a lot of work around children's behavioral health. So I think that you're right. The city has a lot to offer in terms of supporting this issue. And this issue, you've got to understand, runs across some of the policies that we've been talking about, that affect
transgender.
youngsters. So I agree that we need to do a lot of work with the kids, too.
If I could, in my research on this, Kathleen's absolutely right. We have a lot of the pieces already in place. We just don't have it formulated into a plan that we have in a handbook. And
Yep.
I'm going to say the same thing with regard to pregnancy. On a couple of your points, the standard operating procedure right now, according to Dr. Braska, for both the high school and the middle school, and I didn't poll the elementary schools, is they use Riverbend or they send the kids to the ER. So they have those collaborative relationships. And with regard to, I want to say Naomi, is that how you say? NAMI, excuse me. 3 of our counselors are trained with the National Association of Mental Illness over at the high
Good.
school. So they've made that collaboration. So I think once we can pull it all together into a plan and disseminate it in our parent-student handbook, it'll be a lot clearer and easy for people to locate.
Perfect, thank you.
Could I recommend that we look at the policy and move the policy forward and
Yep.
not wait for the plan? I just need a little time to really work with those folks and make sure, Karen and I, to make sure that all the elements are in there, all the resources are listed, all of the tools that we can provide for our students. I don't want to rush that. I want to get it done, because obviously I have dates and obligations relative to this policy, but
Yeah, when I suggested could they be done simultaneously, I was not in any way suggesting that the policy should wait for the plan. I think, although we certainly said that, we weren't looking at voting on anything tonight because we hadn't seen it, I think what I'd like to do is see whether we can't move this to a vote for next meeting. with the plan to follow as closely thereafter as is, I don't want to say humanly possible, but as quickly as we could get it in place, with all of its attendant moving parts.
That works. That works.
But since this is the first time we've seen it,
Right.
I don't think we want to bring this to a vote tonight. But we can certainly look at holding another committee meeting between now and,
You
I
have
don't
one
have the
scheduled.
calendar, but what?
You have one scheduled, I believe.
I think we do too. I have to,
I just have to look. I don't have it with me tonight. But I have your schedule. Well, excuse
don't
me,
see it
if
on the
you,
schedule,
it
but
isn't
we
on the
certainly-
schedule, I'm looking at the December, I don't think we scheduled it, but you do.
but I think we can.
We
and I think
could,
should.
want to do the second Monday of the month in December, which would be the 14th. And there's nothing else scheduled that night, I'm assuming.
I don't see anything
I don't
scheduled,
have
so,
anything.
Excuse me for interrupting. We do have a communications meeting scheduled December 21st at 4:30.
I'm sorry, that was really breaking up. Could you try that again?
Yeah, I know what you said. I think we backed the policy committee to after the executive committee on the 21st. Am I right, Lyndon?
Correct.
There it is.
Okay,
It's
so
on the
there it is, yeah. It's the 21st, and we remember we said, we talked about this last time, we could have our chairman felt that he could get the executive committee meeting done in about 30 minutes, and then we could follow that up with a policy. Is that right?
Correct.
Just because of
Correct,
the.
I'm confident we can get that, and we had wanted to get another one in December,
Yep.
and that's when we
Yep,
chose.
okay. Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Lyndon, for the reminder.
May I ask 2 questions?
Absolutely, I'm sorry. I was looking at the calendar.
No problem. Right now, the draft says the plan shall be submitted no later than May 31st, 2020.
Right.
So what is our new date, I guess is the
We don't have
question.
one at this point, I don't think. So,
So when I do the new policy, let me
Go ahead.
give you a date, all right? How's that? I don't have it yet, and I want to see what I need to do to make sure it's comprehensive.
right,
And my second, just following up on Mr. Croto, I would like to see a requirement in developing the plan that for formal consultation with some of the outside organizations that have expertise on these areas. NAMI in particular, Riverbend, I think it's the Behavioral Health, Children's Behavioral Health Collaborative at New Futures.
Right. I was a member of the steering committee, so they did a lot of work on this, yeah.
But I think building into the policy that we're reaching out and consulting with those people would be helpful,
Perfect.
but others may disagree.
Jim?
Well, I totally agree. I think it needs to be included in this plan that we are integrating the community, because this is not a problem that only happens during the day while students are in school. This is a community-wide issue that we want to bring all our resources to bear on. The other thing I would suggest as I went through, and I have a question first, when does the annual training take place for our teachers and all? Or
Well, it happened this summer.
So it's in the
Yeah.
summer leading into private
Right,
school? Okay.
right.
So I would just want to make sure that we were in really good shape for this next annual training that incorporates all of this. And my other suggestion would be, as I look through the thing, and the building suicide prevention liaison in each school, I would think that the high school's probably a little too big for just one, and you may want to have someone associated with the CRTC or subdivide that a little bit, just to make it accessible, and so that you know, there is more than one person for such a large group. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Jim.
I'm not on the committee, but I'm just gonna throw that in there anyway.
No, those are great suggestions.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add? Seeing nothing. So we're gonna put policy 532 on the docket for December 21st at 6 PM for the committee to review it and vote on whether or not we are going to send it towards the full board. With hopefully the detailed plan to follow as soon thereafter as we can do it.
Gina, when would you plan on bringing it to the full board?
Well, if we voted on it to bring it forward on the 21st,
Mm-hmm.
then I would say we would bring it in January at
Okay.
the next board meeting.
That would be logically what I would think too, and I just am, just want to throwing out there, making sure that this is communicated. We have 3 new board members that'll start in January, and we should be able to get, if we're going to expect them to vote on this or to be in, we need to get the information to them to review and to be able to look at.
So I'm meeting with them.
Good.
They've set up appointments so far. Several of them have made appointments to come in and see me. So I'll have a list of things. I've already met with most of them once anyway, but I can be more specific now about some of the work that we're doing. So I'll do that.
Excellent.
It's a great
Thank you.
suggestion.
Excuse me, can I answer the question? Gina, would you be considering asking the board to waive first reading and vote on it in January?
Well, I think we would have to have that discussion on the 21st inside the committee meeting.
Yeah.
But yes, I would certainly consider it if that's what the committee feels would be appropriate to get it quickly. The question would be, you know, where are we with drafting of the detailed plan? And depending on where that was, whether or not it needed to have an expedited approval for the January meeting.
Well, the plan itself looks pretty polished right now. I mean, it almost looks like it could just go forward just like it is. So, yeah,
I mean, I think if the committee felt that it needed to go forward and could go forward on a waiving of the first reading, we can certainly recommend that to the board. But it's the board's decision as a whole to decide whether or not we waive the first reading. I don't think I have the ability to make that determination.
well, I wonder if,
We could make it a
if we
recommendation,
could make a
but we can't.
recommendation to bring it to the board, and then at the December meeting, and then let the board decide as a whole whether or not they want to waive the first reading then and there and move it forward, or if they want to roll it around in their mouth for a month and do it in January. At that point, the new members would have heard about it and seen it already, and would have time to give input if necessary.
The problem being is that the December meeting, you know, the discussion on this committee isn't going to be until after the December
Right.
meeting.
Right.
So that doesn't timing-wise work.
The discussion can happen right now.
Well,
I think
that is your, certainly the committee can do that.
That's what I was proposing.
Yeah,
I mean,
and-
or at least putting out there. I mean, as I say, the policy looks pretty polished right now. It's come from very good roots from the, it was from the
Established
legislature,
practice.
but also from the,
The Department of
School
Ed, it mirrors the
Association.
technical advisory from the
but
Department of
doesn't it
Ed.
come from
New Hampshire School Board
It does,
Association, right?
And
yeah.
we've
they're
used so
loyal.
many of their
Right.
policies and
Yep.
just tweaked them, you know, sometimes as little as putting Concord School District in place of something else. I mean, if the committee likes it enough right now, we can move it we could at least move it for a first reading. If the board looks at it understands that there's a need to move it forward in a hurry, then they can say, you know what? I can move it forward tonight rather than doing just a first reading.
Right, and
But it would mean that we would need to move it forward to the board today.
Right, and I understand that. My concern on the other side is the appearance that we're trying to put things in before the new board members are sworn in, which I absolutely do not want to have the appearance of.
Well, I absolutely do not either. However, time is the essence here in this particular.
Well, because
Policy.
we're out of compliance, absolutely.
So I would think as good future board members, they would say, yes, by all means, become compliant, and then we'll read it as you put it out there. I mean, we still have a board right now. We still have a committee right now. We still have a board. We can make this happen. Future board members can look at it and say, hey, you know what? Let's bring it up in February and review it. Just throwing stuff out there.
Well, Pam, what do you think?
If we're comfortable amending it and the superintendent is willing to give us a date on when the plan would be ready, those are, I'm not sure that this would be considered I wouldn't have felt like if I was being sworn in 2 months later that there was something wrong with moving forward with the suicide prevention policy, I guess.
I'm just concerned about perhaps
Yes.
community involvement and not having a chance to have that
Right.
happen before we accept the policy.
I'm also willing to meet again before the next board meeting if that's something we do to.
We could also look at that. So, let me,
You've got busy schedules over there.
We do have
Yeah,
a busy
we do.
schedule.
You are, I mean, you are out straight. If all you need is a date for, the plan, you know, for me, I'm catching up here. I'm
right, and I'm trying
catch
not
up.
to,
I mean,
you have nothing else on your plate, Kathleen.
Right, but I
so-
mean, these are the things that we've been working our way through, so, I just don't know, I haven't seen all the components of the plan, and I don't wanna,
Right.
I wanna know how much work I need to have done on it.
Exactly.
And I have no problem, you know, working with NAMI or New Futures or any of the groups in Riverbend.
Gina, if I may.
Oh, sure, Jim. Yeah.
Sorry. I think you don't have to necessarily have a date tonight, but when you would bring it into the board on December, you would certainly want to have it. My personal feeling is I'm a little uncomfortable with bringing something on the 21st of December, waiving 2 readings and voting on it in the very first week in January as to whether we'll have created enough opportunity for community input on this, and I think that's very important with this particular policy. So I actually, think it's better if you go December, January, not forego a second reading, to allow other people to have input, especially our community organizations. But I will ask the superintendent, and this is just one of the many things I think that got moved with COVID from what they had initially intended. When do you think you'd be able to know when or how long it would take to pull together a plan? Would you know by December? Would you know by the end of this month? I guess I'm asking, or that may go to Karen. I'm not sure. I'll leave that up to you, Superintendent, as to where that.
That's a hard one right now. There's so much out there.
Okay, so
I don't wanna
I
overpromise.
will,
Okay.
I will
No,
step
wanna-
forward then as committee chair. And Tom, I hear your concerns. I hear the concerns about coming into compliance. But I also hear that our superintendent and our Title IX coordinator need a little bit more time. So I think I would like to ask that we will bring it forward on the 21st to vote on a recommendation whether to bring it forward to the board in January for the first reading, and allow the board at that point to decide whether or not it wants to waive the first reading. So, that's what I'm hearing, is that there needs to be a little more time. So do you have anything else you wanna?
I just want to clarify that I wasn't looking to move this forward tonight with a plan, but only to move forward what was
With the
written
policy.
and presented in
Right.
front of us, and the plan date could come later. But I'm okay with it. I'm on a short time now, so I'll leave it up to you folks.
Okay, and Pam, how does that sit with you?
Yeah, that's fine. I had a question just on, can policies carry over from one school board session
Oh, they all do.
to policy draft? So if you hear something on December, it doesn't end with that. Okay, thank you.
I don't
No.
believe so.
And then
Jim?
furthermore, yes, okay, and furthermore, Pam, if we as a board feel that we didn't do a good job or that we could do a better job and all, we can review a policy. You could certainly be in one of these meetings and say, I'd like us to reconsider policy number 145, and we can bring it up and review it again. There's
Oh.
not a requirement that says, once it's there, it's stuck.
That
Because we
that I
want to improve
understood.
that,
I just
yeah.
wasn't sure if you could have a first reading on a policy and then have new
Board members come in
members
for the
start and
second
not
reading.
have to. That's my background is legislative. You can't do that in the legislature. Everything dies. So I wasn't sure where it goes here.
Yeah, we would.
We don't kind
Okay.
of die, we can carry it
Okay,
over.
great.
But the biggest thing is that everyone would have adequate
Yeah.
time to be able to read and review the policy, I think. But that's a great question.
And, the other part of this policy that's really important, although they've done a lot of work at the high school, let's not forget elementary and middle here. This is not just a high school adolescent issue. And so that's why I've been so
Sadly
hesitant to give you a date, because I need to talk to those elementary principals, and, I think it's best if we look at the policy, we pass the policy, I'll give you a date of completion for the plan, but I don't want to be held to it tonight, that's all.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
I get
I-
it, I just,
Yeah,
what I
no,
was
I
hearing is
appreciate-
you
no,
need
I
a little more
appreciate it.
time, and so,
Yeah,
this is something I
No.
think that we want to make sure we get it right,
very important,
so,
critically important.
okay.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any more conversation
Thank you,
on
thank you.
532? Okay.
Okay, I got all the pieces for
We
that.
just need to keep in mind, as our subcommittee, that time is of the essence with 532. It cannot languish in some back lagoon.
I won't let it, trust me.
Okay, so now we are taking up the conversation about potentially having a policy that we have provisionally titled 163 regarding pregnant students. Because I believe the other, and Karen, you can correct me, the other policies do in fact, or do not address pregnancy as a status.
It actually, non-discrimination and Title IX both list pregnancy as a suspect class,
Okay,
but that is it.
so we at least can't discriminate against them currently because we have those in place, but this will take it the next step.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
so
Are you ready?
do you want to run with that?
Sure, let me run with that. Okay, so unlike the transgender non-conforming student policy that had a lot of particularity and specificity to it, this particular policy that the New Hampshire School Board has recommended does not, and I'll come back to that in a second. And I also went out and compared other school districts again. I looked at Sanborn once again because I think they're pretty proactive in a lot of ways. And theirs was even shorter. It was really two long sentences, a third one. So the reason I think it's so important that we address this issue is because obviously we have talked about pregnancy in 161, which is the non-discrimination EEO that we dealt with the last time around. And also it is one of those areas that we have to be very careful with under Title IX. I also think it's really, really important for transparency and consistency that this would fall right in behind. As I said, you've got your non-discrimination, and then we deal with the transgender, and then we deal with the pregnancy. When you do research, I was really surprised to find some of the dates were pretty old, but maybe Tom, you can speak to this too. But you know, back in 2013.
You mean from like the
Ow.
1800s?
No. Did I? Oh, geez.
I think this happened once before in this meeting, but I'm not
How
quite
did I
sure.
say that? I apologize. Maybe, no, I was looking back only to 2013, so it's not the Civil War time.
Oh, okay.
But it did appear when you looked at the statistics that about 26% of young men and women combined had dropped out of public high school because of parenting. That was one of their major factors in deciding to leave school. And a large percentage of that was based on young women who were becoming pregnant. So I took a look at the state policy, the model policy, if you will, and again, it's pretty sparse. I would like to recommend, and I need your guidance on this, but I would like to recommend that we keep our policy fairly sparse. I think this addresses the big pieces, but I think it's more appropriate that we address the particulars of this subject in our parent-student handbook, because there are so many issues. I went back and I looked at the DOE from Office of Civil Rights guidance and policy on the most frequently asked questions and issues of contention. I went to the ATICSA, which is the Title IX association. And we do, and I'm pleased to say this, once again, doing my research and talking to the folks. I interviewed one of the assistant principals today on this. I'm talking to the ELL to her tomorrow, and then I'll be talking to the school nurse. We have processes in place, but we don't have anything in writing. Mm-hmm. There's no guiding document. It's just, oh, well, here's how we've done this in the past. It's sort of like passed out. So when you're looking at a policy like this, I think we say out loud, you know, we're not going to discriminate. We've said that. You will be permitted to continue in school and take part in all their educational benefits and opportunities. But then in our handbook, we then address things that are really important, like services. I find out that the nurse today, I learned that the nurse does, immediately does a referral out for prenatal care, that they do counseling on nutrition, that they work with parents. There's a requirement. The school, when they know they have a child who is under the age of 18 who is pregnant, they do reach out and inform the parents. Okay, if it's a mother and a student father, they inform both parents. They keep within the school. They keep the folks who have a need to know to a minimum to protect confidentiality. That would be the counselors, the school nurses, school nurse, the principal, people like that. They talk about they have a policy in place that if they have to miss class for appointments, or they need extended deadlines, or they need tutoring or independent study outside of school, they have mechanisms to make all that happen, which is a good thing, but they don't have anything in writing. Ergonomic consideration, things like, when a young woman gets pregnant, she sometimes becomes very large. I did. So sometimes you need accommodations, bigger desks. When women deliver children, obviously a lot of them want to breastfeed. You need a place where they can pump, not a bathroom. So there are really good considerations that I think we need to be able, and I'd love to work with the staff. When I was talking to Kylie Shalaskas today, she was really excited. She said, we'd love to work on this. No two situations are going to be identical, but if we have an outline of the issues that we think need to be addressed, much like the plan for transitioning kids, then we have something in writing, and we can look to that in the parents too. So I don't think the policy, my recommendation, and I certainly will take your guidance, is that we keep our policy fairly sparse, but then we refer to the handbook for the parent and students, and we can keep that updated on an annual basis.
Okay.
So that's kind of where I've been working. I wanted to put this, as I said, put it out and get your guidance, and then take it forward from here.
So I have a point of clarification. So, are we considering moving forward with 163 or 528?
This one is, I thought I heard it down as 528, although I think it more correctly, I defer to Lyndon's expertise, but it kind of fits in nicely behind 162, making it 163 under non-discrimination. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, no,
No,
I have
on
one in
this
front of
it
me
says
here that says
163.
163.
But on the stuff that was circulated through the
Right.
drive, it was 528.
Oh, okay.
Can I say, I looked at the policy again, and the 160s are really meant for overarching district policies. I had initially numbered it 163, but when I was looking at the policy categories, it seemed to me it would be better in student rights, and that is 520 to 540. So I took it upon myself, since I'm the one who usually numbers them to begin with, but you can certainly change it as you like.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because 528 seemed a lot more comprehensive than 163, but I hear your concern about brevity as well. Not that 528 is that large.
I think.
I'm not sure.
I think they're the same
It's the
one,
same
Tom.
one. They're the same one.
Same thing, but just different
They're
numbers.
just numbers.
Well, I had a lot more questions on 163
I
than I
may
did
have messed up
528.
163 in the drive. I apologize. When Jack just printed it out, these are questions I had as I was reading through it. I usually use Microsoft, and that's how I make notes. So those are my notes.
Okay. Well, that answers a lot of my questions.
Well, I actually have a question that might throw a small nuclear explosion in the middle of this policy. So we're considering, under the transgender policy, not necessarily informing parents of children who are 14 or older that they would like to be called by a different name. And yet we are immediately notifying the principal, the nurse, who then turn around and notify the parents of kids who are over that age that they are pregnant, potentially against their wishes. Not pregnant against their wishes, although
Well,
that may be
maybe.
the case.
Yeah.
But notifying their parents potentially against their wishes.
Well, I would say the reason is there's a health consideration.
I don't disagree. I just want everybody to be really clear that we're drawing a
exactly
line
right.
in
I-
one place
Exactly
and
right.
not the other.
I would actually say that there's case law in New Hampshire that suggests that you should not be able to tell the parents. There was a teacher fired in Farmington for refusing to inform a student's parents that she was pregnant because New Hampshire has a law that allows young women to bypass their parents and go to a court if they choose to have an abortion. That student was considering it. The principal thought the parents should be informed, fired the teacher for refusing to inform the parents, and the Supreme Court ruled for the teacher. That we have a parental notification law that has a judicial bypass. So if a young woman went to a teacher and said, "I'm pregnant, I'm thinking of getting an abortion,"
We wouldn't touch that, nor should our teachers. They don't-
no, they shouldn't touch it,
On the
but neither
abortion
should they
issue.
be informing parents.
Well, in some instances, it's helping the students. I can look at that again, but in some instances, it's helping the students inform the parents
Yes.
that they're pregnant. But
But
I
you-
don't.
Wasn't the
in
issue
many
in Farmington more about abortion than it was about the child being pregnant?
It was, but that could be the issue here. And I mean, reproductive health care for minors has greater protections and confidentiality than health care in general. Minors can get contraception and get reproductive health care without informing their parents, without information being kept confidential. So if we have a policy now that requires us to inform parents, I have a problem. I have some questions about that. I think you could make the health argument on both, and we want students to inform their parents, and we want to help them have those conversations. But we also have to understand there's families where that might not be possible.
I'll go do more research because I'm uncomfortable because let's say you have a 15-year-old who comes forward and says, I'm pregnant, and the principal talks to the student, and the principal thinks that it was not a consensual relationship, and then he or she has the obligation to notify DCYF, which then gets back to the parent. So I think that-
Absolutely, but I think DCYF is better equipped because, quite frankly, it could be a relative, or it could, so I think DCYF is better equipped to make, it should be reported.
yeah.
I think DCYF is better equipped to make those determinations than
Yeah.
a principal.
Do you mean as far as notifying the parents?
As far as notifying parents or investigating whether the pregnancy violates, was the result of a violation of state law.
Okay. I'd like more time to go back and
Well,
look at that issue.
I was
on
just gonna
the-
say, I think we need,
Because I think-
I think this is as potentially delicate a situation as any of the other policies that we're looking at. And I think, because that was my issue about, there is a bypass of letting parents not be notified. And if our immediate policy,
You mean on the transgender?
no.
on
If,
Pregnancy.
if a
Pregnancy.
young woman is pregnant,
Yeah.
and decides that she wants to terminate the pregnancy, there is a bypass provision that they do not have to inform the parents. They go in and petition a court
Right.
for permission without necessarily notifying the minor's parents. I'm not sure that we want to step into the middle of that and directly notify parents when there is a provision in state law allowing the parents to, protecting the privacy of the minor
Yeah.
and not notifying the parents.
Again,
So I think, I'm just saying, I think this is potentially as delicate as any of the other policies regarding gender or sex or
Yeah.
mental health issues, or, how do we thread the very narrow needle of protecting our kids but still honoring parental rights?
and I think the fine line might be the abortion issue, which I'm not in any way suggesting we get involved in.
But you would be
But
if
you
you
would
would,
be.
under the policy you described.
I don't.
If you're informing the parents, you are bypassing the state law that that allows another option and getting in the middle of the,
Potentially getting in the middle of the whole abortion issue that you didn't want to get into.
I think it's
But
a
you
great
have a health
question
and
for
safety.
Dean Eggert.
Yeah, yeah. But we also have a safety, health consideration of the student in school that we know about.
Right.
So
There's a
that's the
balance
piece
here.
that I'm
well,
thinking
and
about.
I think, you can all see my notes now, so, but I have concerns that you're telling teachers that they need to go inform the principals. I think if the teacher believes a child, we have to be reinforcing that teachers need to be reporting to DCYF if they have concerns. I would like see a policy that is affirming, as we're attempting to be with the transgender policy, about confidentiality, protecting students, and helping them get an education. This feels very defensive and sort of undercutting the rights of students.
Okay.
We'll let you come to school if you have a doctor's note, which I'm not sure complies with federal law completely unless it's our policy for everything. And,
I'm certainly willing to go back and confer more with Will Phillips, who's the policy writer, also an attorney, and always
Yeah.
complies with the state law, to see where we could be in conflict here.
Well, I think that this is the very reason that this committee exists.
Yep.
Is for this type of conversation and to talk about things and to bring up more questions and get clarification. Then it goes from here.
And then finally, if we did decide to put more information, if we go forward, don't forget we have paternal issues as well when you're dealing with fathers who are also students who may want to attend medical appointments and do those other kinds of things.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
those will be kind of unique and factors we need to look at. So.
Great.
Any other comments that anyone has on any of the three potential policies that we're looking at? Seeing none, Is there any other business before the Communications and Policy Committee this evening? Seeing none, do I have a motion to, or do we need a motion, or
Yeah,
do I have a motion to adjourn the committee meeting?
that's so moved.
I'll second.
Okay. Moved by Tom, seconded by Pam. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, this meeting is adjourned at 6:53.
Gina, you're setting a record.
Yeah.
Good job.